Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast for another episode. Matthew and I here ready and waiting for your questions, answers, and topics. So Here we go. Let's jump in, Matthew. What do we got today?
We're midway through the year.
Yeah, we are.
It's 6 months have already gone. So
2021 for those of you that are listening in 2023.
Yep. So this is literally probably our 20th something podcast of the year. So thank you guys for hanging in there with us. We have a lot of feedback coming in. It's all great feedback, different topics to talk about. So the next topic that I want to talk about, which is a pretty big thing in the marketplace right now, is inflation. I was reading an article that was saying it's up to about 6.6%. I wanted to get your thoughts on what this means for a dental practice.
First of all, just so everybody knows that Dental Wealth Podcast is on the cutting edge of what's happening in the marketplace, right? That's actually sounded like some kind of like...
Thank you, Google.
That's right. Welcome to WBC Radio.
Sponsored by Red Bull.
Oh my God! Now we gotta go to Red Bull and get money.
Yeah. Thank you, Red Bull. That's your plug.
Yeah, anybody wants to put their sponsorship, we'll just start stacking up here on the table.
Be like a grocery store right here.
That's right.
All the brands.
Stack them up. Welcome to WBC. Today we're talking about inflation. So inflation.
Click this link to get to discount code.
That's right. I think inflation, it's interesting, which is, by the way, this has been coming for a long time.
Yeah. I
mean, this is not a... it's like we see the patterns and we know patterns are coming, and there's different ways to look at this is where you can kind of say, look, what should we have been doing to prepare, because you should have been preparing, and what is it that you ultimately plan on doing about it, and how does it correlate to other things that we need to be making decisions on. It's there's things where we could look at and say, for instance, and I'm going to get back to inflation for a second, but I want you to just think about this for a second. It's just kind of on the same topic, but it's just thinking about where we are right now. Stock market's at an all-time high, right? The real estate market's at an all-time high, right? Yeah. And in 2005, had we had the conversation, the problem is no one knew when the bottom was going to drop. And it's easy to go in 2008, what a bunch of dummies, But the problem is it's like Bitcoin. Let's go to Bitcoin for a second, very briefly. Well, no one knows when the bottom's going to drop. The bottom's going to drop, but no one knows when. And so what ends up happening is, if you've got Bitcoin and you're like, maybe you went from 60,000 to 35,000, 6,000, whatever it is today, and people go, why don't you sell it? I mean, because nobody knows when to sell. That's the problem with timing markets, right? But we do know that there's things like we need to do to protect ourselves. So we need to have access to capital. We need to be able to realize that there's going to be opportunity in the marketplace. We need to understand that people are going to be hurt when it drops. That if you're not prepared for your portfolio to drop 30%, like in 2008, you need to be prepared for that. Whether it happens or not, I think you need to be prepared for it. You need to have capital on the side, saying, "Hey, look, where do I want to invest capital so that I have the ability to do something about it when the time comes." And so, because there are going to be deals again, there are going to be opportunities again, and inflation. When we talk about inflation. You and I were talking about, Chipotle. It's not Chipotle. Chipotle. They've got another crisis on their hands, which is, they've increased the price dramatically, percentage-wise, to keep with inflation. And so it's kind of like the boiling the frog a little bit. If we, one of the things I always tell people is you should be increasing your fees annually. Well, the insurance company, I don't give a darn about the insurance company.
Always be looking at.
You should be increasing your fees annually, because that's what happens, because 3% per year is typically inflation. So you should be increasing them 3%. The problem is when you don't do that, and then all of a sudden inflation pops through the roof, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I got to go from this to this. Well, there's two parts about that. Is one, you should have been kind of looking out for this to begin with, because that's why you do it every year. But the second part is, what do you do about it? See, because if the dollar goes further, by the way, this is not the economics podcast. We don't know what ultimately will happen, but whether inflation hits a sky high number or not, we don't know, but we do know that it's important to know that there's probably a likelihood that if the dollar does not go as far, people might not be able to pay the dental care. They might not, because you might increase your fees. They might not. Other things, because if bread becomes more expensive and gasoline becomes more expensive and everything else becomes more expensive, we can always see what happened with goods because the supply chain was impacted. We're seeing it with across the board. And so if all this starts happening and the dollar doesn't go as far as it did, then how does that impact the ability to get dental care?
Yeah. I think it also, I mean, it comes down to, I mean, you might see your dental supply reps come to you and say some of these prices have changed.
Yeah.
I mean, the inflation is going to affect them too, so you have to be able to adjust for it. I mean, that's why we always say look at your fees annually. Like if you haven't increased your fees in 6 years, that's something you should probably start looking at doing, just based on 3% inflation rate every year. And this year it might be a record high, it might not be. Right now it's pretty high. So you're seeing a lot of changes in the marketplace. Like we were talking about with the Chipotle, they increased the price of burrito and people freaked out. And they started looking internally and looking at, you know, the owner and the CEO saying, why isn't he taking a pay cut and doing all these things? So it's something that you have to look at. And like you said, it's be prepared on the front end. If you're not prepared on the front end, then you can't expect your patients to understand why you randomly come up to them and say, hey, we're increasing our fees 10%.
Well, the crazy part about some of this, like when 2008 happened, because that was the last financial crisis, when 2008 happened, like everyone can see like that you should have been buying in 2008 and 2009, 2010, 2011. Like you should have been buying stocks. You should have been buying real estate. The problem with that is nobody remembers the emotional, right? It's hard when I remember buying a stock in 2008 and 2009 and 2010 and watching it just go like drop and drop and drop and drop. And you keep buying it and it keeps dropping. And that's the right thing to do, by the way. You want to continue buying as the stock's going down, as long as the stock is a healthy company. You want to continue buying as the stock goes down, because then eventually you're pushing down your average price per share. And so, or your cost per share. So what ends up happening is that makes the right strategy. But emotionally, when you see, and you paid $75 a share and it goes to $50 a share, down to $20 a share, down to $10 a share, down to $6 a share.
Start freaking out a little
You start freaking out a little bit that, hey, I'm going to lose all my money here. And so I think that's what we have to temper the emotional side and go, look, I'm telling you here on the Dental Wealth Podcast that and I've been saying this for a long time. Look, what goes up must come down. If you're not parking money to the side to some degree, like you're making a huge mistake. You've got to, you know, Kiyosaki will tell you go get some gold, but I think the problem with gold is it's got a lot of holding cost and it's hard to get your money out. So I think that, I don't just go run out and buy gold. I had somebody like 5 years ago take their entire portfolio and put it in gold, and so, cause they got scared. And so look, don't go do knee-jerk reactions, but be tempered. Look, you need to do sales training now more than you ever have. If someone doesn't buy a procedure, it's because you didn't show them the value of the procedure. You didn't explain to them why it was so important. They still bought the Louis Vuitton purse. They still bought the car they wanted. They still got the house they wanted. They still went on the vacation they wanted to. You didn't convince them that this is the procedure that they should take on. So not only do you have to raise fees to keep up with the marketplace, which you're going to have to probably do, depending on what happens with inflation, you might. So I would tell everyone listening to this, you need to keep an eye on inflation. This is something as a business owner, you need to watch, because it will impact you. If your goods and services that you have to buy, for instance, dental supplies and dental equipment, go up 20, 30%, and they could. What are you going to do about it if you haven't looked at your own price point? And I'm not trying to scare people around inflation. I'm just telling you need to watch it. And if the fees start going up, I mean, and it's happening across the board. Now, lumber's the number one, right? And that has a lot to do with the supply chain. I get that. But we need to go back and look at the marketplace and say, look, there are some things we can do now, right now, because if we have this conversation 6 months from now, inflation could be a crazy number. But so we have the conversation now when it's not crazy, it's higher than average. Does the Fed jump in? What ends up happening? Like I said, I'm not going to get into all that, but we have to go back and make sure that we're doing the things we need to, which is I would be doing sales training right now because the fact that I would be in preparation for this. I wouldn't wait until inflation got high and then I'll start to go, okay, we have to increase our prices, and then not being able to overcome that objection. So I would be working with my team now to focus on that so that you're ahead of it. It's the same thing we were doing when in the middle of COVID, saying you should be marketing because nobody else is. I'm telling you ahead of time, you need to be doing prep your team, get ready for inflation. Worst case scenario, you have a hell of a trained team,
talented team.
But and then look at your fees, watch inflation, look at your costs of suppliers, look at your cost of supplies, look at it as a percentage of revenues. Is that number moving as a percentage of revenues? What's actually happening to your margins? And watching it, because you need to watch it.
Yeah, and I think the sales training aspect of it is huge. I mean, even if you don't increase your fees now, but you keep seeing inflation going up, it's being prepared for that. Because you're going to have patients that come in if you do increase your fees. You need your team to be able to jump on that, handle the objections.
That's right.
Make sure they get, because you're serving the patient. Ultimately speaking, who's going to do better dental care than you? So that's why you serve patients. So getting them to move forward is key. And having, I think in the industry, what we see is a lot of doctors are reactive instead of proactive. And this is an opportunity, just like what we talked about last year, where a lot of our clients did really well, is because they were proactive. They started saving capital. We told them to start marketing. They were proactive when it came to COVID. So how do we get the next thing? Could be, inflation prices. You need to be proactive on that. And one of the ways you do it is sales training. Just train your team and say, what we're looking at, potentially, depending on how the marketplace shows, we might have to start increasing our fees. What's going to happen is patients are going to have these objections, and you need to be able to overcome them.
That's right. And, if you don't know how to do it, you need to have a team around you that can help you. Yeah. But you've got to be ready for this. And so, I would call all team member meeting, get together, and I would put dates on the calendar for role play. And I would role play a patient. I would literally go in the dental chair. And because train as you fight, fight as you train. When we were on, I was in the military, we used live rounds to train. Why? Because that's train as you fight, fight as you train. So do it in the dental chair. Don't just do it in the front office. Go into the dental chair and then have team member play, one person be the patient and one person be the doctor or be the hygienist or be the assistant or whomever. So I would make sure that was happening, and I would role play as often as possible. You could do it 20 minutes every day. Yeah. I mean, look, if you had a highly trained sales team, and yes, I'm saying sales, yes, you serve by selling, by getting people across the line and move forward with services. So, and not things that people don't need, but the things that they need. And then you need to be able to think through that. And then you also need to think through your financing options and what are other options that we can do. And so I would role play this. I would role play it with my clinical team. I would role play it with my administrative team. I would talk through this and get strategic, because if you're not ready, all of a sudden people are like, look, I mean, everything I'm buying right now is so much more expensive. I can't afford to get a crown right now, or I can't afford to get this, because you'll have to raise your fees if your suppliers and everyone else raise their fees. So you'll raise your fees, and so all of a sudden someone goes, well, it was $1,400, but now it's $2,000 for a crown. And so you got to be prepared for that. And by the way, do the insurance companies increase their fees to match up with inflation, which is probably not, because I doubt they're going to increase their reimbursements to you. And so now if the dollar bill doesn't go as far and your reimbursement is static because of contractual obligations, now what does it do to your business? And so this is some serious stuff. You thought dealing with the person who quit was a big deal. I mean, this is some serious stuff. Yeah.
Business changing. I mean, this is really getting honed in on your numbers. I mean, we always stress that with clients is you have to know the numbers of your business. You have to know every dollar that goes out of your business, where it's going. You need to monitor that, because you don't want to be surprised. A surprise bill is not great. So when the supply rep comes in, you need to start looking at that, because if inflation keeps going the way it is, those prices will probably go up. So
and talk to your supply reps. Have a conversation. Listen, I know inflation is coming up. Can we talk about what that means to my organization? Can we talk about what that, are you guys seeing increasing prices for yourself? Are you planning on raising prices? If so, how much? On what items? And you got to kind of be proactive in this game. This is why if you don't have financials and you don't have no idea what's going on in your business, you're going to get creamed. Like, you've got to be ahead of this. This is the same thing going into 2008. If I had told you in 2006, things are kicking butt, put aside capital because you'll be able to buy a bunch of stuff when the market drops, you wouldn't have done it because you would have said, it's going to be great. Yeah. Well, no, it's not going to be good forever. The stock market's not going to be good forever. And inflation is going to increase. We all know that. Yeah. And things are going, right? There are things that the stock market will come down. Right, the housing market, by the way, will come down. These things are going to happen in the marketplace. When? If I knew that, I'd be a billionaire. Yeah. I mean, I'd short it. I would know what. We
would know exactly what to buy.
That's right. No, I mean, you just go on Reddit. Yeah. So no one knows exactly. That's called timing markets, and no one knows for sure because trust me, there's a lot of hedge funds out there trying to do just that. So guessing isn't, these guys are using master computers to try to figure out the exact same thing and doing regression analysis to try to figure out the correlations. But you have to think through for a minute on your own business. So here's what I want you to think about is like this idea of, am I prepared if inflation increases? Yeah. In what areas do I need to be prepared? Am I financially prepared? Is my team prepared? And what are the vendors, including insurance companies, around me? What is their plan to deal with inflation? And what are my fees? And how should I move them accordingly? Have a proactive plan in place and start executing your plan now. If you don't have time for this, that's fine. Then recruit a team member to be your specialist on this. And monitoring this, and then this is a way that you can stay ahead of inflationary concerns.
Yeah, we had a doctor that was in one of in our 90-day program, and they were looking at the fees, and surprisingly enough, they haven't increased fees in 10 years. So just by increasing fees, they were able to bring in 6 figures worth of additional revenue.
Wow.
So, one of the things, if inflation, your supply reps come back to you and say, right now we're good to go, everything's good, still encourage you to look at your fees. Like, a lot of times I see practices that haven't changed anything, and it's only going to be a bigger jump if inflation keeps going up. So how do you mitigate the jump?
Especially if you're fee for service. Hey, if you're fee for service, people are going to be more price sensitive. I mean, it's just something for you to know. I mean, if you're fee for service and people are more price sensitive, that's going to affect the fee for service market. And you say, well, will people be willing to pay fee for service? Yes, but less of them. Yeah. So you got to be able to be on top of this. This is called economic modeling, and you've got to do some kind of preparation for this and around this to make sure you're not missing the mark. And you've got to know this. So I would tell anyone that, look, Tower Leadership has to look at it. By the way, I want to make a comment that you made. I thought it was good. Years ago, I had this doctor who was looking at moving into an area. So I said, well, why don't I call some of your competitors and do a price analysis in your area? So I started calling dental offices, and I was like, hey, how much do you charge for a crown? How much do you charge? I started kind of asking. Yeah. I came across so many practices that were charging. We're fee for service. We're not contracted with anybody. We'll file the claim for you. And they said it with such a pretentious tone. Yeah. But their fees that they were charging were below the UCR of the insurance companies. So I'm like, if you were contracted, you would be getting paid more. Money. But because they had this mindset, well, I'm fee for service. Yeah. I know I'm getting paid more. No, you're not necessarily are. If you are fee for service, you better be looking at what the contracted rates are, so you're aware of what contracted rates are. And then you need to look at, so if you're in contract with a bunch of companies, you need to be looking and seeing how these companies are going to deal with inflation, or how would they deal with inflationary concerns. If you're out of network with companies, you need to deal with how a patient's going to deal with inflationary concerns. All of us need to deal with the patient's inflationary concerns. And look, worst case scenario, like I said, let's just say that the Fed jumps in and we're able to control inflation, and let's just say that is to happen. I'm not so sure about that, but if that is happening, well, great. Then you just have one hell of a sales team, and you're prepared.
You're prepared, and you know your numbers, and you know that you're charging the right amount. You looked at your fees. You're ahead of the game. I promise you, if you just do that and inflation gets handled by the government, you're going to be in 90th percentile of all dentists.
That's right. That's right.
More importantly.
That's right. And these are the things as business owners. These are these outside influencers. These are like the things you can't control from. Yeah. You can't control inflation. You have no control over inflation, but you can control what you do about it. You can't control the housing market. You can control what you do about it. You can't control the stock market, but you can control what you do about it. These are the things you go back to. This is what I can control. These are the things that I have control over. And it's, it's funny, I see people will be complaining about the last election, the election before that for the next 12 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, those are not things I get to control. I can't control tax rates. I vote once every 4 years, 2 years, depending on the election. And that's all I can do.
Yeah.
And so then I deal with whatever comes down the road. I'm smart enough to know that the pendulum goes to the left and it goes to the right. Yep. Guys, I mean, some of this stuff's predictable. Look, 2022, the Republicans will most likely take both sides of Congress. Why? The reason why is very predictable, because whatever party's on the out in the mid elections, they tend to take power or at least pick up quite a few seats. Yeah. That happens every single time. It's been happening forever. Yeah. It's predictable. So you should see the Republicans in 2022 most likely take control of the Senate, definitely probably take control of the House. And so that is predictable, right? Yeah. Gas, right? And then that way in 2024, then we're kind of a wide open again. And gas prices increase in the summer, right? Yep. I mean, there's just things that people sound so, no, it's not a surprise. These are the things that are predictable. Home prices are at an all-time high. So when you see prices at an all-time high, you go, okay, so they're most likely going to drop. Yeah. So now, if you're waiting to buy a home, well, I mean, you could be waiting 5 years. I mean, there's no way to know. That's the problem with timing markets. But I'm talking more from an investment standpoint. Mm-hmm. From an investment standpoint, if you're an investor or looking from an investment standpoint, you might say, well, this might be a good time to sit on the sidelines and store cash. Yeah. And be prepared
for when it drops.
Because most people won't look how to mitigate inflation. Mm-hmm. Most people won't know how to handle it. And most people won't be able to jump on opportunities in the marketplace. And so you want to look at it and say, what opportunities might I be able to jump on? Yeah. And what companies will get decimated by this if it happens. And it gives you the ability to do some things about it. Inflation will absolutely hurt small business dramatically. If they're not insulated from it.
Yeah, so just get prepared, guys. I mean, you got to be prepared for any situation that gets thrown at you. So one of the biggest ways you can do that is have a killer sales team, look at your fees, and be prepared.
That's like great advice. This advice brought to you by Red Bull.
Yeah, sugar-free.
Red Bull, you owe us.
Yes.
I do. It's like you do the little like smile, like ting, you know.
Like Wayne's World.
This brought to you by iPhone. Get the new iPhone, right? It's Apple now owes us money too.
Sweet. Let's just keep it going.
We'll get like a cease and desist letter from Apple. We'll be like, please quit saying our name. But you know, I do think that these are great conversations. What a relevant conversation at a relevant time. And I'll guarantee no one else is talking about this in the dental industry. And I think it's really important but you heard it here on the Dental Wealth Podcast, right? Share it, like it. No, seriously, I'm actually pretty serious. Look, this is something you should send to your friend. You're going to try to explain it to him. Just shoot it to a friend. Say, hey, look, I'd love it. This is like one of those intellectual conversations where you go, hey, I'd love for you to listen to this podcast. And I'd love to talk about it afterwards. And what do you think? What are you planning to doing around this? What are your thoughts on this, right? These are one of those things where you share something like this because you're trying to increase the conversation amongst your dental friends. Maybe it's a peer group of dentists that you guys say, look, let's get together once a month, right? And talk about how we're dealing with these concerns. Go get together and go to a nice steakhouse once a month and have a nice dinner and just talk about strategy together. What a great way to break bread. I mean, so many times a lot of dental study clubs and things are, you know, it's kind of like dinner and it's someone doing some kind of lunch and learn, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I'm talking about, something way more serious, right? This is you guys sitting down and saying, as a strategic partnership, and I say partnership because it's a group of peers, what can we do as a team? What are you doing? Like, share best practices. Yeah. Share what other people are doing. There's abundance and scarcity. Look, there's enough business to go around. You don't need to worry about someone might get your idea. Don't do that. Like, share with the community. Share with your friends. Share, take a podcast like this and share it. Put it on, a Dental Peeps feed, or put it somewhere where you can say, look, I'd love to discuss this. Put it on an open forum. Look, these are things you need to talk about because it allows debate, it allows conversation, it allows best practices, and it stokes some ideas that literally might be the difference between saving your year, saving your practice, saving somebody else's practice. It might not even be your own, but it might save someone else, and it might help your family, it might help your patients. There's so many things that can come out of something like this. So what a relevant conversation, very great timing. So look, that was another question that came. Keep on top of the questions, keep sending them in. We'll make sure we stay on top of it. Guys, I hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you next time.